Welcome to Cody in the Cinema. Today I'm discussing Ingmar Bergman's classic, Wild Strawberries. And the reason I decided to rewatch this and give it a review was because I was in this place in Stanton, Virginia called Bargain Books. It's a massive bookstore. Lots of used books. And Stanton is kind of known for being a literary sort of astute place, if you will. They have the Blackfriars live Shakespeare shows just in town. It's a great place. And I found this copy of the BFI film classic, BFI Film Classics, Wild Strawberries, just some essays. And I had to pick this up. I mean, it was in great condition. And I was like, well, I guess I'll be reading through this and doing a video on this. And I had not seen this film except on an old DVD copy many years ago. Got this from my parents, actually, for a gift, I believe. And I rewatched here on my Blu-ray Bergman. And this film on a rewatch was just such a wonderful experience. This is one of the best pieces Criterion ever put out, by the way. Maybe even their best. This might be their best package. And so if you don't have this, get it. It's worth the price. I've watched through so many of these, some more than once. It's a great product all around. But if you aren't familiar with Wild Strawberries, Victor Sjöström, who was a great silent film actor himself, notably that scene in, I believe it was The Phantom Carriage, which is referenced in many ways in this film. There are some like axe cutting scenes that The Shining alluded to many years later. But a tremendous actor who plays an older man in this film, and he is going to receive an honorary award for his work. He's, like I said, as a professor there, as a doctor or whatever, and he's a little smug. He's a little, well, it seems as if he hasn't been the most compassionate fella, hasn't been the warmest fella, maybe even a little bit cold. And, if you look at some of the supplements in the Criterion stuff, like to what extent is that Bergman talking about himself? Well, that's up for debate. But as he goes about this, he's writing with his daughter-in-law, and she may or may not be getting back with her husband. They've had some friction, and you find out a little bit more about that. But on their way, they go by this old house where he used to live and go and so forth. And he is recalling a series of memories, and he's having a series of dreams and flashbacks about the house, about perhaps what might happen in his future, what's happened in his past. And it becomes this multi-layered, beautiful film. On one hand, you have these terrifying dreams, and I did want to read a segment from the book to you that I got in this store. So the dream, listen to this description. And this is on page 17 of my book. But the credit titles are followed by a disturbing nightmare in which Sjöström's character sees a clock without hands outside a watchmaker's shop, examines his own handless watch, meets a faceless man, and is nearly knocked over when a horse-drawn hearse without a coachman goes out of control and sheds a wheel. The coffin that crashes to the ground opens, and a hand reaches out to grasp his hand. The corpse is that of Bjorg himself. It's a really good nightmare scene, and you'll probably appreciate how the camera will sometimes zoom close in, far away, every kind. The master of camera work. There are lots of great framing shots in this, especially to capture that despair of our protagonist. And gosh, he plays the character with such a likability for someone who's supposed to be so cold and distant and unlikable. It's difficult not to admire him as one of the those old men in your life who might have been old and grouchy, but they've softened up a little bit over the years. I can be a bit crotchety myself, so I relate a lot to this character. I believe, reading through this, there may have been even one of the characters, B.B. Anderson, who's in a number of these films with Bergman. I think there might have even been some kind of chemistry with him as an older man, Sjöström as an older man, and this younger 22-year-old actress, because he's just so charismatic on the screen. and he is funny. And I'll tell you, for all of the sadness that we sometimes hear about with Bergman films, this one's pretty funny, especially some of the characters that are picked up. There's these three characters that are in this love triangle. And the humor in the film, I know my wife, the last time we tried to watch a Bergman, I showed her Cries and Whispers, and she was like, Cody, this is a lot. But she really got into the humor of this one, and I think the humor is so true and poignant and really captures that experience of a life lived by an intelligent man in Sjöström. I was kind of throwing around the term or the phrase, the merry versus the macabre. On one hand, we have these folks playing in the fields and gathering strawberries and enjoying bright, just bright light, white, flashing light almost, it feels like at times. And then we do have these darker shots. There's one with a baby carriage that's real spooky and it's so naturalistically brutal. You know what, I was just talking about this, they're almost like parts of it that remind me of some of the scenes in Kurosawa's Rashomon out in the fields, where some disturbing things happen in that picture. I think if you are drawn to black and white movies, this is one of the great uses of it in that way. I really can't imagine this having been shot in color, because there's so much, the actual trees and the leaves and the way that those almost become like prison gates or something, or prison gates, bars, over the screen, sort of trapping Sjöström's character. It's really great stuff. And there is so much obviously about the younger generation versus the older generation when, his daughter-in-law is talking to him about, like, this is what's going on with the marriage, this is why, and he's having to kind of take this in as an older man, or the younger trio that are enjoying their lives and trying to figure out what they're going to do with their future. And that also has some foreshadowing elements for some of what you learn about the plot as you go along. But there is no judgment made on the youth, and there is no judgment made on the elder. The film simply shows it to you. And I find parts of that to be similar to something like Yasujiro Ozu and his sort of generational conflicts. Now, Ozu tends to, I think, explore that area, that generational gap a little bit more than this film did, but you might find some similarities there. So if you do like a slow-moving character drama like that, you may like this. Although, as I've said, this film does deal with nightmares and dreams and flashbacks. And, I talked about the first great dream, but there's another dream sequence that's a little bit closer to something that might have been in something like The Phantom Carriage, where a man is forced to reflect on choices he's made. And I do think that those parts work well. The fact that this movie can go from this cheery, almost like screwball comedy, and then pivot very quickly to this dark philosophical film that almost reminds you of something like out of Bela Tarr, of course, who came many years later, is just fascinating. And I love that about Bergman. He was never burdened down by a singular approach, I don't think, although his films do have a distinctive signature. And I think Wild Strawberries really takes advantage of so much of what does make him such a phenomenal talent and has made him one of the greatest directors of all time. So if you haven't seen Wild Strawberries, you definitely should do that. It is a beautiful film. It is a fun film to watch. It is hilarious at times. Sometimes it's sad. But by the end and where it goes, there is such a tender relationship shown between this woman that has been working in his home for many years, and it leaves you ready for a good nap or sleep at the end. I think you'll be satisfied, and if you're looking for something on a snowy day, which as at the time of this video, we're about to get a bunch of snow, I think this would be a great choice for you. So those are some of my thoughts, just having immediately, watched this and read parts of this awesome book, which was, like I said, BFI Film Classics, if you want to check it out, by Philip and Kirsty French is what it says. I'll try to find a link to that and put it in the description in case you're interested. Philip is a film critic, or at the time was, and Kirsty French says is a teacher of modern language and a translator. So I'll put a link there if you're interested in the book. If you did like the video, if you want to give it a like, a like click, that would be great. Like buttons do grow YouTube channels. And tell me anything else you want to in the comments, and we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.